Well, Mr. Akinfatunke joins us virtually so we can talk about the issues that we've highlighted in our top stories for today. Hello, good to have you join us today.
Nice to be here, Perpetual. I hope you keeping well, you keeping warm.
Absolutely.
Global warming all over the place. Thank you for having me, and good morning. Good whatever time it is for all our friends of Nigeria, wherever they may be. Thank you.
Okay, so we just went through the top 4 stories. I'd like you to comment on them. Which would you like to start with? Maybe we should just start with the very first one, talking about discos and the federal government, the control, battling for the control of discos. Let's have your thought.
My thoughts are simple, and it's the thought that developmental economists will have, and that is the fact that one of the Achilles heel to our economic growth and development is planlessness, procurement management, facilities management, and general administration. And euphemism for all that is governance, according to the rule of law that must follow some processes, and it generally must be upward looking. At one point in time, when we had a country that we call Nigeria, it was part of a planning cycle process. And so you had a way of ticking boxes and ensuring whatever box has been ticked is reviewed and reappraised before you begin to now say that you are feeling very comfortable. So we had decided to run before we learned how to walk, and that is having its toll. So, for instance, like you said in your intro, power generation has gone down to 3992.6 megawatts, dropped from 3908.8 megawatts in June, and further dropped to 385. You, Perpetual.
Please go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay. So now know that we are in darkness. Issues surrounding gas supply not done, and one of the projects.
Okay, I guess we're having challenges hearing Akinfatunke. If you can hear me, please go ahead. Okay, basically we're looking at the planned takeover of 3 power distribution companies by Fidelity Bank, and we have a situation where the discos are not ready to let go, and we also have analysts and experts who are, are also sharing their own thoughts. If you can hear me, please go on ahead. But I'd like you to start with this really. What are the issues that have necessitated federal government's backed takeover? I want to believe that there is something on the ground, and that's why the federal government is backing Fidelity Bank in its plan, to take over these discos. So what are the issues here?
The first issue is the issue of management and process. It was a 10-year management plan for the takeover by the discos. I hope you are still hearing me.
Oh, absolutely.
And within those 10 years, 5 years is midterm. We needed to have looked how far have they been able to look at the issue of the license that they have? How much of infrastructures have they been able to add on? Did the whole process follow what you call a disciplined procurement process? I just say no. And so they are talking today about the fact that they have liquidity problems. They are talking about today that they have gas supply problems, which within the microcosm of the overall ecosystem, of course, they have a point. But you see, you don't come like wanting to come into a race and then you begin to give excuses. That is one. By the time NEPA, PHCN, okay, that comes to PHCN was unbundled, it was generating some 3,800 megawatts at that time. We have just one managing director and a few EDs. Today, we are talking about 25 MDs generating just an average of about 2,400 megawatts. And so I tell you, the banks that they had approached to borrow money from, about 5 of them that are, in my last count, will virtually go under if an urgent first aid action is not taken. So that is one of the issues. I'm talking about the thing needs to be restructured. I believe the BPE, in their wisdom, have decided to say, well, if you have asked a pilot to drive a caterpillar instead of putting me in a plane, and naturally, the law of mechanics will take its toll. It's been trained to do certain things. And if you have not done it properly, it's high time for us to raise our hands and say, yes, we've not done it properly, and we need to have a look at them. However, in doing that, it has to follow what I call due process of law. And so if the discos are saying, for instance, that it is something they could do and they've not been able to do it for 5 years, and yet they are crying foul, I think a round table discussions surrounding the issues should be sought. And if they cannot, I repeat, if they cannot, if they do not have the capacity to do it, because ab initio, I want to believe our procurement process looked at capacity to do and just not job for the boys and girls. This is now the time for the sake of country. For the sake of country, a round table and seek for ways to go. But if we don't do that, we are going to get a crash, and that crash will take all of us under. Those are my initial thoughts concerning the tussle between the power generation companies and the discos. If nothing is done, we keep on dropping, and in terms of power that we are generating, and the implication of that to our food security, the implication of that to our security, the implication of that to our health management system.
All right, thank you so much for your thoughts on that particular one. I think you've done a great job of answering that particular question, talking about due process and some other things that must be put into place. And I also like the fact that you talked about this stakeholders kind of meeting so that the issues can be resolved amicably. All right, let's move on to the second one that talked about Nigeria attracting $223.3 million in the first 5 months, and this is 3.7% increase compared to what Nigeria attracted in the corresponding year 2021. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is, again, sometimes you, in economics, you call it some factor endowment. And what does that say? Yeah, if the rain should just fall, you have crops all growing, the potentials are there for you to be able to earn. And the diaspora remittances, which had dwindled in times past, suddenly is beginning to sprout. One, no little thanks to the tinkering that I know the CBN has done to allow, the Western unions of this world, the flutter waves that have just sprung up, and then just bring your little bits and pieces into country with incentives for those at home to earn just a little bit. And don't forget, I am always very careful when I quote statistics. First quarter of 2022, according to the...
Oh, I guess so. Please go.
Okay, the GDP has sprung up, but I tell you, even the 3.7% increase within the corresponding period last year indicated, when you look at 2020, the pandemic year, so we seem to be doing little steps in the right direction, but I'd like to let you know clearly there's still a long way to go. IATA, it's been withheld $450 million because of lack of forex. We are talking about the inflation pressures, we are talking about exchange rate depreciation, we are talking about trade openness that Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala has continually preached on. We're talking about political violence, we're talking about corruption. All this, when you put them in place and you have a regime that allows the forces of demand and supply to fix our exchange rate, which is not what we are doing now, you will be surprised that only a rain will need to fall. We are going to get bananas, we're going to get pineapple, we are going to get a wild rain that will be competing with the state of Israel. I say so. If only we can harness and put all that together.
All right, thank you for your thoughts. But you mentioned quite some things that you think can be done. Are there other things you probably think can be done so that we can attract even more foreign direct investment? Because when you look at 2022, the year of the pandemic, we seem to have even attracted more compared to 2020, beg your pardon, we seem to have attracted more because in 2020, we attracted $241.5 million foreign direct investment. But now in 2022, we could only attract $223.3 million. That's a 7.5% decline. What's happening here?
What's happening is simple. The diaspora brothers and sisters are having a feel, oh, what a helpless. I have my mother, I have my brothers in Nigeria during the pandemic. The country was not doing well. Anyway, well, it affected them too, but they had a way of making sure they remit to try and help boost. Now that the pandemic not totally gone, but at least has abated. And with the Russian-Ukraine war, not smiling at everybody, food hunger, all on the upward swing, job losses therefrom. And you asked me the question, are there other things that needs to be done? Yes, there has to be the issue of trust, that they can trust that when their monies come in, there will be no encumbrances. There has to be issue of transparency. There has to be issue of taking care of security, because oil production, which has dipped far below the OPEC quota, what are we doing? What exactly is it that we are doing? Oil theft, all these factors that affect, exchange rates of naira to dollar, and then the almighty discussion on the table, the giant elephants in the room, which is issue of deregulation and the PIA coming on board, which has been stalled, is showing situations.
Okay, sir. All right, I think that's a good place to end this particular conversation while we move on to the other stories. But we're actually talking about foreign direct investments, talking about companies coming into the country to invest, okay, and he also mentioned diaspora remittances, which of course was actually made very possible, and we recorded increase because of the naira for dollar print project of the CBN. That's a good one. All right, moving on to the third story. We're looking at gas producers. For them, they are urging the federal government to pay up $1 billion legacy debt. That's a whole lot. Talk to us about that.
About that.
Yes, gas producers, they are urging the federal government to settle the legacy debt owed them for gas supplied to thermal power generating companies, which of course amounts to about $1 billion. All right, if you can hear me, please go ahead. Okay, well, this particular one is about the president of the Nigerian Gas Association, who also doubles. What did you say?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Okay.
And I was making the point that again, it comes to the issue surrounding governance. Cash call back in the days when I was in oil and gas, it runs into billions, and it affected naturally our capacity to invest. And what happened? Foreign investors voted with their legs onto Angola, and it's part of the reasons why we are talking about what we need to be talking about now. So I agree that if $1 billion dollars, not naira, $1 billion is long overdue, and there has to be a way of netting this off Otherwise, I'll tell you, we have 5 times that the national grid has collapsed, affects national gas supply, our gas flaring, that we have been on for more than 20, 25 years. We need some kind of seriousness. Vandalism again to the gas pipelines needs to be well taken care of. And the theft, putting right pegs around holes to man that area is also a thing to look at. Now, if I've been given July 1, and this is where I want to draw this line here, I've been given July 1 that we suddenly will not be getting a lot of light in our homes. July 1 is gone. It therefore means there is lack of trust, there is lack of capacity to do. It's for want of people to be able to do it. But it's for the government to have the political will to be able to do what is necessary. And I dare say, this is now the time for PIA to come on board, all stakeholders, again, including labor. It's not the time for us now to be saying we have to pay appropriate prices now. That's another subject. We have to pay appropriate prices for us to be able to get value and consistently down the value chain. If we don't do that and we just shut ourselves up, I'm afraid I ain't starting anything yet.
All right, thank you for that particular thought you landed with. That means you definitely agree with the gas producers who are also asking for a free market pricing regime. Well, let's move on to the last one, talking about food security. And then we have AFDB President Additional talking about the fact that Africa needs $424 billion to survive this crisis we're talking about. Let's have your thought on this.
My thought on this is number one, prime. Food security. Food necessity. And Dr. Akim Adeshino is sounding it loud and clear. The average man or woman who goes to the markets today in Nigeria will tell you there is abject hunger in the land. Of course, at the back of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which in itself has shot up vegetable oil and wheat prices. And if Africa, like he has enunciated, depends 41% of their wheat and maize on Ukraine, and the war that we thought was going to be just one day, according to Russia, is now continuing to linger. We then have a grave problem on the whole world, but particularly on Nigeria. 30 million Africans now in extreme, abject poverty. We've been in poverty. It's not becoming extreme, abject poverty. We had the issue of debt overhang. The way that the private sector should continue to now look at the debts. We are piling and piling debts. IMF is closing its doors. We are going to China. And the implications. Even though we claim that this has been done on infrastructure, is thinned out because our revenue generated to be able to repay the debt.
Let me come in here. Let me come in here. Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
If we decide to put it on, yes. But if we continue to do what we are doing, we are going to continue to be in perpetual darkness, internecine wars. We are going to go back into the era of where what we have seen in Nigeria is lack of education. The schools will continue to shut down. And the fact that I have always said that there are creative ways of getting funds. The funds are flying internationally. We don't necessarily have to borrow another subject entirely. We can index that. Indonesia is doing that. I know for sure, even the US, even in China that we are talking about, we're going to talk about Brazil, we're going to talk about India. We have assets that are not being utilized the way they should be utilized. Let's list them, let's tell them. And government started by making sure we get an assets register to list all the things that we have, and then foreign capital will come. Education, that's exactly the way it is funded elsewhere. the government has no capacity to do. So light is going to come at the end of the tunnel if we deliberately stand up, switch on the gang. If light is not coming, we can do something that put it around. But if we stay exactly where we are, thinking that manna is going to come from heaven, I think we'll continue to go down. That's not what I'm looking at.
All
Some
right,
African countries
are
they are already looking in that direction. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not looking in that direction yet. If you look at Rwanda, if you look at Ethiopia, if you look at Kenya, they are all embracing. If you look at Tanzania, they are all embracing.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ifatunke.
Thank you very much, Perpetua, and take care of yourself.
All right, thank you. So, well, we've been speaking with Akinfatunke, a chartered accountant. We'll take a break now, and when we return, manufacturers urge federal government to grant them licenses to import diesel from Niger and Chad. They also task government to develop a response strategy to address challenges emanating from the armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But that's our next talking point. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.